When August comes to an end and September is in full swing, it's officially time to turn to fall flavors. Starbucks starts early with pumpkin spice lattes before the end of August, but September, October, and November are definitely the best months for embracing all things pumpkin with plenty of streusel. And we have the perfect recipe for you to bake on repeat all fall long. Ditch the traditional coffee cake and dress it up for the season with this simple recipe. Werewolves have long been part of our human cultural lexicon on an international scale. The ancient Greeks told tales of the Arcadian king Lycaon who was once turned into a wolf by an angry Zeus. In the Norse Saga of the Volsungs, Sigmund and Sinfjotli wore wolfskins that they couldn't remove, which turned them into werewolves. Blackfoot mythology has a tale of a man turned into a man-wolf hybrid. With just a handful of easy-to-find ingredients and under 40 minutes of your time, and you'll have a moist coffee cake jam-packed with notes of cinnamon and pumpkin as the perfect breakfast treat. With a hefty layer of pumpkin streusel on top, it's the ideal autumn recipe. So, what are you waiting for? Grab a slice, a cup of coffee, and cozy up as the leaves begin to fall. Gather the ingredients for this pumpkin coffee cake recipe. To get started on making this pumpkin coffee cake, first gather all of your ingredients. For this recipe, you'll need brown sugar, butter, canned pumpkin, 2 eggs, flour, baking soda, baking powder, salt, and ground cinnamon. Be sure when you're grabbing canned pumpkin that it's not the pumpkin pie mix. You want plain and simple canned pumpkin for this recipe. These long-standing global images of a wolf-man hybrid became early cinema legend, first and foremost in the 1913 silent film, The Werewolf, a film now considered lost. Werewolf horror has been present in the earliest years of cinema until even the contemporary era. Werewolf cinema boasts early classics like 1935's Werewolf of London, and 1941's The Wolfman, to contemporary successes like 2021's Werewolves Within. It spans subgenres from horror comedy in An American Werewolf in London, to the high-octane action horror of Dog Soldiers, to the whodunit werewolf hybrid of The Beast Must Die. Covering the whole of film history, here is a list of the best werewolf movies in cinema history. Each of these excellent films will build your love of lycanthropy and your wonder over the werewolf. 12. To make a glaze to drizzle on top, you'll also need powdered sugar and milk. Cream the butter and sugar to get started on this pumpkin coffee cake recipe. First, preheat your oven to 350 F to allow plenty of time for it to come up to the proper temperature. Next up, grab a large mixing bowl. Wolfkop, 2014. In 2014's Wolfkop, Lou Garo, Leo Fafard, is an alcoholic cop in a small town of Woodhaven. Willie Higgins, Jonathan Cherry, places a call about suspicious occult activity, sending Lou to investigate. He finds occult activity, of course, before being ambushed and knocked out. Higgins wakes with no memory of what happened, but he now has a pentagram carved into his chest. Add 6 tablespoons of softened butter into the bowl, and use a hand mixer to cream the softened butter with 1 cup of brown sugar until fluffy. Once the butter and sugar is creamed, mix in the eggs until combined. He beings a gradual transformation, eventually becoming the beast. Then, mix in 3/4 of a cup of pumpkin. Add the dry ingredients to finish the batter in a separate bowl. Add in 1 3/4 cups flour, the baking soda, baking powder, half a teaspoon of salt, and 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. Lou soon discovers he was the victim of a ritual intended to use a werewolf to strengthen the magic of shapeshifting reptilian aliens. If that sounds like a hodgepodge of ideas, it is. The film is a horror comedy send-up of genre film. Mix to combine. Once the liquid mixture is mixed and ready, gradually mix the dry ingredients into the bowl. At the same time, the film is imaginative and funny with a thorough knowledge of the genres it's satirizing. Mix just until the batter comes together. Boasting a 65% certified fresh rating on review aggregator site Rotten Tomatoes, Wolfkop definitely leans more on the comedy side of horror comedies, but it's absolutely an engaging, if bonkers, entry in the annals of werewolf film history. You want to avoid over-mixing so the gluten in the flour won't develop too much, which ultimately results in a dry cake. Make the pumpkin streusel topping once the batter is prepped. Prepare the pumpkin streusel to go on top. In a small bowl, combine 1 1/4 cups flour, half a cup of brown sugar, 1 teaspoon cinnamon, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Next, melt the 4 tablespoons of butter and pour it into the dry mixture. Add in 2 teaspoons of pumpkin, and use a large fork to mix the ingredients until combined.
Clumps will begin to form in the mixture. Sprinkle the streusel and bake the coffee cake. Spray an 8-inch square cake pan with cooking spray to prevent the coffee cake from sticking. Perhaps most importantly, the werewolf costume is good. What more does anyone need? 11. A 10-inch round cake pan will work as well. Once the batter is ready, use a spatula to spread the batter into the pan. Sprinkle the pumpkin streusel topping over the batter, thoroughly covering the top. Bake the coffee cake for 25 to 30 minutes until the top is set and the streusel is a light golden brown. The Howling, 1981, serial murderer Eddie Quist is on the loose in Los Angeles. He stalks journalist Karen White, who aids the police in their attempt to solve the crime. She's found and briefly tormented by Eddie after the police use her as bait, and he's shot. Once baked, remove the coffee cake from the oven and set it aside to cool. To add a glaze on top, whisk together 2 cups of powdered sugar and 1 tablespoon of milk. The ordeal begins to take a psychological toll on Karen. She tries to get away from it all and attends Dr. George Wagner's isolated retreat, the Colony, with her husband Bill in hopes to get well. If the mixture is too thick, add a bit more milk. If it's too runny, add more powdered sugar and whisk until smooth. We gradually come to understand that the Colony is neither safe nor werewolf-free and Karen is more in danger than ever. The Howling is quite an amusing werewolf horror comedy. Drizzle the glaze over top of the pumpkin coffee cake before serving. With just a handful of easy-to-find ingredients, and you'll have a moist coffee cake packed with notes of cinnamon and pumpkin as the perfect breakfast treat. 1½ cups brown sugar, divided 10 tablespoons butter, softened and divided 3/4 cup plus 2 teaspoons pumpkin, divided 2 eggs 3 cups flour, divided 1 teaspoon baking soda 1/2 teaspoon baking powder 3/4 teaspoon salt, divided 3 teaspoons ground cinnamon, divided 2 cups powdered sugar 1 tablespoon milk. Preheat the oven to 350 F. Cream 1 cup brown sugar and 6 tablespoons softened butter in a mixing bowl with a hand mixer until fluffy. Mix in the eggs, and then mix in 3/4 cup pumpkin. Combine 1 3/4 cups flour, baking soda, baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon salt, and 2 teaspoons cinnamon in a separate bowl. Gradually mix the dry ingredient mixture into the wet ingredient mixture until the batter comes together. To make the streusel topping, combine 1 1/4 cups flour, 1/2 cup brown sugar, 1 teaspoon cinnamon, and 1/4 teaspoon salt in a small bowl. Director Joe Dante ably manages to balance scares and laughs as the situation gets perpetually larger, spiraling out of control. Mix to combine. Pour 4 tablespoons melted butter into the bowl along with 2 teaspoons pumpkin, and mix the mixture with a large fork to combine. The makeup special effects are also top tier, constructed by makeup maestro Rob Bottin, who notably also worked on classics like The Thing, Total Recall, Say 7N, and Fight Club. Mix until large clumps form. Prepare an 8-inch square cake pan with cooking spray to prevent sticking. Use a spatula to spread the batter into the pan. Sprinkle the cinnamon streusel topping over the batter. Bake the coffee cake for 25 to 30 minutes until set. It's easily a must-see classic that stands out among 1980s werewolf films. 10. Once baked, remove from the oven to cool. To make a glaze for the top of this coffee cake, whisk together 2 cups powdered sugar and 1 to 2 tablespoons milk in a small bowl. Wolfen, 1981, Michael Wadley's Wolfen is an intriguing werewolf horror noir hybrid, focusing on New York City police investigator Dewey Wilson, Albert Finney. The city is plagued by a slew of mutilations that appear to be done by a wild animal. If the mixture is too runny, add more powdered sugar. Once the coffee cake has cooled, use a spoon to drizzle the glaze over the top. Serve and enjoy. The information shown is Edamam's estimate based on available ingredients and preparation. He teams with criminologist Rebecca Neff, Diane Venora, and the pair investigate. Wilson eventually makes his way to an old acquaintance, the Native American former activist Eddie Holt, Edward James Olmos. Holt points the pair both towards the true supernatural cause of the attacks and to his own shapeshifting abilities. They discover that werewolf clans have been killing to protect their hunting grounds within the city, and that there may be little humanity can do about it. Wolfen is an intriguing horror noir film, and a rare example of that hybrid genre altogether, with a complex mythos, solid worldbuilding, strong performances from Finney and Olmos, and smart direction. It should not be considered a substitute for a professional nutritionist's advice. Finney himself truly shines, and the film takes some unique directions among other entries in the cinematic werewolf canon. 9.
Werewolf of London 1935 S. Werewolf of London isn't the werewolf film we typically associate with the classic Universal monsters, but it's a distinguished member of the series nonetheless, and by some accounts the first mainstream, feature-length Hollywood film to feature a werewolf. Wilfred Glendon, Henry Hull, is an English botanist who travels to Tibet in search of a rare plant before being bitten by a werewolf. Glendon is gradually overcome by the lycanthropy and driven to kill, with the one temporary antidote, said rare plant, in short supply. It's bad news for a man losing control of his transformations and animalistic bloodlust, setting up a tragic end. In addition to being the first major werewolf film, the film boasts werewolf makeup from the legendary Jack Pierce, who went on to do more complex werewolf makeup for The Wolfman 6 years later. The film is referenced in titles like 1981's An American Werewolf in London, the 1978 Warren Zevon track, Werewolves of London, and it's a solid addition in the pantheon of werewolf movies. 8. Dog Soldiers, 2002, Neil Marshall's excellent, Dog Soldiers, follows a small squad of British soldiers on a training mission in the Scottish Highlands. Their goal is to find a special ops unit, but they discover a single survivor of a vicious massacre. The group that attacked the special ops team proceeds to regroup and attack the squad before the latter are saved by zoologist Emma Cleesby, who explains the true nature of their foes: they're werewolves. The isolated unit have to survive the night until the full moon disappears. As far as werewolf horror cinema goes, Dog Soldiers is a high-octane thrill ride and a frightening film to boot. It has great action and choreography, talented direction, and strong performances from a cast you see all over now, alongside a great and novel werewolf design. These werewolves are purely inhuman, upright-standing humanoids beasts, sleek and muscular and dangerous. The simple premise, survive the night versus a vicious coordinated werewolf attack, allows the film to feel like a tense, focused exercise in intense terror. A definite must-see. 7. The Company of Wolves, 1985, Neil Jordan's 1984 fantasy horror film, The Company of Wolves, is a stunning take on the Little Red Riding Hood mythos. Young Rosaline goes to stay with her grandmother and is given a red shawl to wear. The grandmother speaks of an ominous prophecy: don't stray from the path, never eat a windfall apple, and never trust a man whose eyebrows meet. Her village is under siege by a mysterious wolf who has been attacking the cattle. There's modern-day frame story that makes it more complex, and the supernatural menace looms large. The film is co-written by Jordan and Angela Carter from Carter's Own Story, and it's an interesting film with a multi-layered narrative, a strong fantasy feel, and a stunning ending. As far as 1980s werewolf films go, films like An American Werewolf in London and The Howling rightfully get mentioned a lot as important films in the lycanthrope canon. But The Company of Wolves has excellently developed fairytale elements, and shouldn't be forgotten as a truly great film. 6. Werewolves Within, 2021. While whodunits have been popular throughout film history, werewolf whodunits are few and far between. One worth mentioning is 2021's Werewolves Within. This Josh Rubin written and directed flick is based on the Ubisoft VR game, Werewolves Within, and stars Sam Richardson as new forest ranger Finn. Finn arrives at a small-town Beaverfield when a storm forces him, the townsfolk, and mail carrier Cecily Moore to pile into a local lodge while the town is under blackout. With everyone corralled, evidence mounts that a werewolf may be on the loose. The group have to figure out if that's true and how to discover the culprit in a wonderful horror comedy. The film is charming from first frame to last, loaded with twists and turns, and the lead performances by Richardson and Weintraub are exceptional. It's a tightly written, ably directed, fun werewolf film with some great kills, and its snowy atmosphere is perfect for a winter's day. It's a definite modern classic that's even been hailed by some as the greatest film based on a video game of all time. 5. Ginger Snaps 2. Unleashed, 2004. The original, Ginger Snaps, sees the bond of two sisters, Bridget and Ginger, broken when the later is turned into a werewolf. The film is followed by two subsequent projects filmed back-to-back, the sequel, Ginger Snaps 2. Unleashed, and the far-in-the-past prequel, Ginger Snaps Back. The Beginning. The sequel sees Bridget attempt to use the herb monk's hood to cure her lycanthropy, but it's found to be impossible. The best that can be done is to slow down the transformations. As she increasingly becomes subject to thoughts of sex and murder, she eventually finds herself in a clinic where she meets Ghost. All the while she's followed by a male werewolf. She finds herself beset on all sides. The werewolf increasingly threatens her and her community, while Ghost manipulates her through feigned friendship with plans on using Bridget's condition as a weapon. While Ginger Snaps is a classic that highlights a changing relationship between once close sisters alongside growing puberty pains, Ginger Snaps 2 is focused on one's relationship to one's own changing self and issues of betrayal and human villainy. Emily Perkins delivers an excellent performance once again as Bridget, easily carrying a film that's both tense and smartly written. It's certainly a different film than its predecessor, but an exceptional one nonetheless. 4. An American Werewolf in London, 1981, John Landis's An American Werewolf in London follows two college students, David Naughton, and Jack Griffin Dunn, as they backpack through Britain. They find themselves attacked by a large wolf-like creature. Jack doesn't survive as David heals, and is plagued by nightmarish visions of Jack, who warns him he's becoming a werewolf. David wrestles with thoughts of ending it all before he transforms fully and loses all control, with an ending that really wows. In addition to being recognized as a top-tier werewolf film, An American Werewolf in London is also often acknowledged as one of the greatest horror comedies of all time. The film also boasts one of cinema's most dramatic and terrifying transformation scenes, as well as exceptional makeup by iconic creature creator and makeup artist Rick Baker, who won his first Academy Award for his work on the film. The film is ultimately one of the best and most memorable werewolf films in history. 3. The Wolf of Snow Hollow, 2020, Jim Cummings' The Wolf of Snow Hollow follows alcoholic police officer John Marshall Cummings, as he's called in to investigate a vicious murder of two tourists in the town of Snow Hollow, Utah. These small-town police become shocked by the brutality and the increasing wave of murders in this once peaceful town. When locals start to whisper about the appearance of a werewolf-type beast, the rumor mill begins to terrify the town as they prod the police to stop the carnage. The Wolf of Snow Hollow has a strong sense of place and tone, great performances, some novel twists that really land, and it's really a lot of fun. It's also worth noting that the film marks the final performance of the excellent Robert Forster, and his layered portrayal of John's father Sheriff Hadley. The film is dedicated to him. If you haven't seen it, it's easily worth a watch. 2. Ginger Snaps, 2000, Ginger Snaps follows sisters Ginger, Catherine Isabel, and Bridget, Emily Perkins, who are fascinated with the morbid and who make a death pact: move away together or die by 16. The area in which they live is plagued by a series of violently killed animal corpses. One day Ginger has her first period while the sisters are out getting revenge on a bully. The blood draws the attention of the beast that's been attacking, and the pair get attacked with Ginger as wounded. You can probably guess which supernatural beast what did it and what happens. Many films and TV entries had used lycanthropy as a metaphor for puberty, but often for boys. I was a teenage werewolf, or teen wolf, anyone. But Ginger Snaps is easily the best of them. The performances land, the story works, the use of the metaphor for girls' puberty is symbolically strong. The werewolves are cool, and pretty much all of it is an incredible example of a horror film being successfully layered with meaning. 1. The Wolfman 1941, The Wolfman, is Universal's second foray into lycanthrope cinema following 1935's Werewolf of London. The Wolfman stars Lon Chaney Jr. as Larry Talbot, returning to his family in Wales due to his brother's unfortunate death. He falls in love with the local antique shop owner Gwen Conliffe, Evelyn Ankers, and later saves her friend from a werewolf attack. Tragically, the attack infects him with lycanthropy, setting up a chain of events that sees Larry transform into a werewolf and kill villagers under the spell of his condition. He doesn't initially remember the events, but the memories gradually return and haunt him. Despite the character's evident death in the end, Lon Chaney Jr. played the popular Wolfman in 4 sequels. The Wolfman boasts a great performance by Lon Chaney Jr. Incidentally, the Wolfman character is the only Universal monster to be played by the same actor throughout the 1940s, a fact Chaney Jr. was proud of. It also has amazing makeup by the legendary Jack Pierce, and the film greatly influenced subsequent werewolf lore in popular culture. It's the cinematic foundation of the majority of werewolf films that followed, and a classic in its own right.